All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating framework that does something pretty unique. It mashes up ancient Eastern philosophy with modern ecopsychology. And the whole point is to give us a kind of map, a map to help us figure out who we really are and how we can fix this deep sense of disconnection so many of us feel in our lives. You know that feeling, right? That sense of alienation, like you're just a little out of sync with everything around you? Well, it turns out that's not just a bad mood. The framework we're looking at today says it's actually a key symptom of a much, much bigger issue. So let's give this problem a name. The source material for this explainer calls it Earth misery. And really, understanding this concept is the first step. It's the foundation for everything else we're about to cover. Okay, let's look a little closer at what this actually means. Earth misery isn't just about the environment being in trouble. The real insight here is that it's about the internal pain, the emotional and social suffering that bubbles up because we've cut ourselves off from the very natural world we're supposed to be a part of. And here's where you see the fallout. Our inner disconnection shows up as real-world trauma and social chaos. But what's absolutely crucial to get is that this inner pain is a mirror image of the external damage we see happening to the planet. They're not separate problems, they're two sides of the exact same coin. So, how do we even begin to find our way out of this mess? Well, like any good explorer, the first thing we need is a map of our own inner world. And for that, this framework looks to a classic model from Vedanta philosophy. I mean, it just makes sense, right? You can't fix a machine if you don't have the schematic. This ancient map is basically our schematic for how human consciousness and our whole experience of life is put together. So here it is. This is the original body-mind-intellect chart, or BMI for short. Just look at the flow here for a second. It all starts at the very top with supreme consciousness, this pure, unfiltered reality. That reality then flows down through our inherent tendencies, which then go on to direct our body, mind, and intellect. And all of that ultimately shapes how we see the world. It's a totally top-down model. Okay, but here's where things get really interesting. The framework we're digging into today suggests a critical update to this ancient map. It's an update that completely reframes the source of all our modern problems. Let's see how this new map builds on the old one. On the left, you've got the classic chart. On the right, the modern adaptation. And you can see right away, the top two layers have new names. Supreme consciousness becomes the GW54 self, and our inherent tendencies are replaced by something called variables X. And that change, well, that changes everything. So what is this GW54 self? Well, think of it as your factory settings. It's your fundamental nature. It doesn't change, it doesn't use words, and it's totally connected to the universe. It's your core essence before life started installing a bunch of weird software on top. In a way, it is nature, just personified as you. And what about the variables? Well, that's the weird software. This is the ego, but it's not who you really are. It's just a collection of all the stuff you've picked up along the way, your personality quirks, your traumas, your habits, and most importantly, what the source material calls your wrangled stories. These are the tangled up narratives we believe about who we are. They basically act like a dirty, smudged lens that distorts the pure light of our true self. Okay, so now we can start connecting the dots. How does this internal filter, this ego, end up creating the very real external problem of Earth misery? It's all about the flow. Let's look at that adapted chart one more time. The path is crystal clear. Everything begins with that pure, true self. But before it can express itself, it has to pass through the messy filter of our variables, our ego, our painful stories. So here's the bottom line. Our experience of reality isn't direct. It's filtered. That pure signal from our true self gets all distorted by the static from our ego. And that distorted signal is what ends up driving our body, our mind, and our intellect, which then determines how we perceive, feel, and think about literally everything. And right there, that is the fundamental mistake we all make. Because we're not even aware of our true self, we start to believe we are the filter. We identify with our body, our mind, our thoughts, and all their limits, completely forgetting the vast, unchanging source that they all come from. So, it stands to reason, right? The thicker and more gunked up that filter of variables becomes, the more power we give to those wrangled stories, the more disconnected we feel, and the deeper our personal and our collective Earth misery gets. Okay, so if the problem is basically a filter of messed up stories that are blocking us from our true natural self, then the solution has to be about cleaning that filter. And the best tool for the job, it turns out, is nature itself. And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If we're stuck behind this lens of our ego and all our past baggage, how do we even get a peek at what's real? How do we actually reconnect? I love this quote because it just nails the beautiful symmetry of the solution. The very thing that caused the pain, disconnecting from nature, is also the key to the cure. Reconnecting is the direct antidote. It's what brings us back to wholeness. And the process is actually pretty straightforward. This isn't about some complex mental exercise. It's about getting back into your body, into your senses. By consciously using our senses in a natural place, we can actually bypass that chattering mind. We quiet down the wrangled stories of the ego, those variables, for just long enough to let our true underlying self come forward again. The endgame here is to get back to what the source material calls homeostatic balance. It's our natural state. By stripping away those destructive variables, by connecting with nature, we find our inner world is suddenly in harmony with the outer world. And in that state, the things that create Earth misery, they just kind of dissolve. So I'll just leave you with this final thought. If our ego, our variables, is really just a tangled up collection of stories we tell ourselves, what happens when we stop listening to them? What happens when we step outside and instead listen to a much older, much deeper story being told by the Earth itself?